In her final year, Cass Elliot was determined to shed her rock star image, so she wasn't afraid to try new things. From headlining a series of intimate shows to singing fast food jingles, the singer was working hard right up until the end. In 1972, Cass Elliot recorded The Road Is No Place for a Lady. Although she had released a number of albums prior to its release, this was Elliot's first solo effort to come out after the Mamas and the Papas split up in 1971. However, the album failed to make the Billboard 200 albums chart, prompting Elliot to seriously rethink her musical style and ambitions in 1973. She fired her Mamas and the Papas era manager, Bobby Dunhill, and brought in Alan Carr, who favored an old-fashioned form of show business that was highly theatrical. In addition to producing Broadway musicals, he managed the careers of entertainers that appealed to an older audience, like Tony Curtis and Anne Margaret. As a result, Carr steered Elliot away from the youth-oriented music she performed in the Mamas and the Papas. In the new image Carr helped create for her, Elliot transformed into a cabaret performer who belted out showy ballads. Cass Elliot was born in 1941 as Ellen Naomi Cohen in Baltimore. 2 weeks shy of her high school graduation in 1959, the future Cass Elliot left school to pursue a career in the arts and subsequently moved to New York City.
Cass was a star. She was a star from the time she was 2 years old. She'd be entertaining on the bus.
Since she achieved so much in the years after leaving her hometown, Baltimore Mayor William Donald Schaefer launched Cass Elliot Day. The August 15, 1973 event was a citywide, day-long celebration of its famous former resident, who attended all the festivities. Cass Elliot Day culminated in a small graduation ceremony, where Mayor Schaefer personally presented Elliot with her high school diploma. After the Mamas and the Papas broke up in the early 1970s, Cass Elliot no longer wanted to be called Mama Cass. So, to drive home the idea, Elliot released the album Don't Call Me Mama Anymore in September 1973. The live album was recorded weeks earlier at a Chicago nightclub and featured a new version of Dream a Little Dream of Me. However, Don't Call Me Mama Anymore failed to reach the Billboard album chart. To promote the album, Elliot starred in a TV variety special that was also called Don't Call Me Mama Anymore. The special aired on CBS around the time of the album's retail release, but was very poorly received. James Brown at the Los Angeles Times wrote in his review, "Mama is the worst hour of television to hit the air in many years. It has all the disaster elements. If Cass doesn't carefully avoid such future television misfires, they not only won't call her Mama, they won't call her period." CBS's Don't Call Me Mama Anymore would turn out to be Elliot's only variety TV special. Although Don't Call Me Mama Anymore didn't instantly transform Elliot into a variety show star, the performer nevertheless showed up on television screens often throughout the 1973-1974 broadcast season. In the fall of 1973, Elliot voiced an animated version of herself in an episode of the new Scooby-Doo movies. Then, for a week in November 1973, she served on the all-star panel of the popular daytime game show Match Game. Elliot also made the rounds on the talk show circuit, guesting on multiple episodes of The Mike Douglas Show, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, and The Merv Griffin Show. Throughout her life, Elliot made several TV appearances on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. She appeared on the popular late-night talk show more than 20 times, including 4 appearances over the course of 1973 and 1974. And on 2 of those appearances, she suffered notable physical harm. First, while leaving the studio, she tripped on a sewer grate and had to go to a local hospital to see if she broke a bone. Weeks later, Elliot returned, but 10 minutes before the show was scheduled to begin, the singer passed out and was rushed to a local hospital. In a May 7, 1974 appearance in The Tonight Show, Elliot explained what happened.
I had a very bad headache that day, and I hadn't been able to eat anything. My blood sugar level dropped or something, and I just sort of tipped over.
The incident required a 4-day hospital stay, and the event made headlines around the US and in Europe. As a major rock star in the 1960s, Cass Elliot did a lot of drugs, but by 1973, she attempted to put substance abuse behind her. Elliot told the Daily Express, "I overdid it. Drugs, booze, the lot. Staying out all night, just being totally undisciplined. I'm not that self-destructive anymore, because I have a lot of things to live for now." With the assistance of a psychotherapist, Elliot had started a mental and physical health regimen and had stopped using drugs, most notably heroin and cocaine. Elliot's ex-husband, Donald Van Wiedemann, spoke about her drug and alcohol use in a 2005 biography of the singer, Dream a Little Dream of Me. He said in the book, she would use pot to mellow her out when she wasn't doing the other or coming off the other drugs, and certainly, she would have had a couple of drinks if she weren't having any drugs. However, Elliot didn't drink at the parties thrown for her during her last weekend alive in 1974. In 1973 and 1974, Cass Elliot took her music into the commercial realm, quite literally. Over the course of multiple sessions, she recorded a series of jingles for the fast food chain Hardee's. Elliot sang in the jingle,
"So let's hurry on down to Hardee's, where the burgers are charcoal broiled."
Elliot's ads were a crucial part of the company's massive expansion in the 1970s. Each of the songs were used in radio and television advertising campaigns, and all were composed by Tupper Saucy, a songwriter and keyboard player for the late 60s psychedelic pop band the Neon Philharmonic. Elliot didn't appear in any of the TV ads, nor was she identified in any of the spots. The Hardee's ads were a for-hire gig that merely kept her voice in the radio until she could release new singles. In 1967, Cass Elliot gave birth to a daughter named Owen. The only child of the entertainer, Owen was born near the end of Elliot's 6-year marriage to Jim Hendrix. Elliot remarried a few years later to Donald von Wiedemann, but that marriage would be over by 1972. Thus, throughout 1973 and 1974, Elliot was a single parent in charge of her daughter's upbringing.
Are you a good mother?
Oh, yes.
Hendrix wasn't Owen's father, as her real paternity was a secret. In the summer of 1974, Elliot promised Michelle Phillips that she'd reveal the identity of her daughter's biological father upon her return from a series of London concerts. However, this never happened, because Elliot died right after those shows. Phillips later managed to track down the man, a musician named Chuck Day. Upon the death of her mother, Owen was adopted by Elliot's sister, singer Leah Cohen, and her husband, drummer Russ Kunkel. As part of her shift to a classic nightclub-style entertainer, Cass Elliot and Alan Carr put together a revue-style show. The show was a collection of soft pop songs, show tunes, dance numbers, and comic sketches that would play well to an older audience in an intimate setting. Elliot and Carr hired a choreographer, a musical director, and 2 men to serve as backup singers, dancers, and skit foils. Among the numbers that Elliot rehearsed and polished were the standard "I'll Be Seeing You," a cover of Paul McCartney's "My Love," and new songs written in a throwback style, like "Don't Call Me Mama Anymore." Elliot then took the show on the road, playing nightclubs, casinos, and supper clubs in Pittsburgh, Miami, San Francisco, Dallas, Chicago, and Las Vegas. That was all a mere warm-up for the fulfillment of a long-held ambition of Elliot's. In the summer of 1974, she took her new act to the Palladium, one of the most respected and historic venues in London. Elliot sold out the theater during her 2-week series of concerts. Elliot was so pleased with her performance at the Palladium show that she used it as a launchpad for bigger and better opportunities in show business. Carr received at least 20 offers for his client to appear in big-budget films and on popular TV shows. Elliot also began planning a small tour that would begin after the Palladium dates. By mid-1974, Elliot had read scripts for TV sitcoms and films, but also continued to focus on her music. In addition to veering away from performing rock and contemporary pop in favor of standards and traditional pop, Elliot was also actively seeking out opportunities to produce music for up-and-coming artists. She'd already produced a single for Canadian singer Roberta Sherwood and assisted on multiple projects for the Canadian folk rock trio Three's a Crowd. Elliot also helped the folk group negotiate a record deal. On Saturday, July 27, 1974, Cass Elliot performed the last 2 concerts of her 2-week stand at the Palladium in London. Backstage, she wrote a message in lipstick on the mirror of her dressing room for the next scheduled performer, Debbie Reynolds. The message read, "Dear Debbie, if they are half as nice to you as they were to me, you will have a great time. Love, Cass." And with that, Elliot was off into the city to celebrate. Immediately after leaving the Palladium, Elliot attended a birthday party for Mick Jagger at a residence in the Chelsea neighborhood. Elliot was then spotted hanging out with Rod Stewart and Pete Townsend of The Who. After dawn, Elliot moved on to a brunch party that singer Georgia Brown had organized to commemorate her successful Palladium shows. Attendees would later report seeing Elliot frequently coughing and having breathing trouble. Late in the afternoon on Sunday, an exhausted Elliot reluctantly attended another event held on her behalf, a cocktail party put together by American television writer Jack Martin. Sunday evening, Elliot returned to her temporary London residence, an apartment in the Mayfair district belonging to fellow pop star Harry Nilsson. On July 27, 1974, 2 Elliot associates arrived at the singer's apartment in London to discuss plans for a small regional concert tour. They didn't disturb Elliot and instead allowed her to sleep off a long run of taxing performances. By mid-afternoon, Elliot remained asleep. Her assistant worried that something was amiss. When she went to check on her, she found the singer lying naked and motionless on the bed, cold to the touch, and with liquid coming out of her mouth. Road manager George Caldwell investigated and declared Elliot dead. The singer was 32 years old. When Sue Cameron, a close friend of Elliot and writer for The Hollywood Reporter, called the apartment in an attempt to confirm the news of the death, Alan Carr answered. Cameron recalled to People, Alan said, "You've got to tell them that she died choking on a ham sandwich. There's a half of a ham sandwich on her nightstand." That planted story led to the enduring misconception that food had killed Elliot.
It still hurts me to my bones to hear that story.
Carr suspected Elliot's death was drug-related, and he'd wanted to get ahead of any resulting negative publicity. Dr. Keith Simpson and Gavin Thurston, a pathologist and coroner, conducted an autopsy immediately after Elliot's death and concluded that the singer had died from an obesity-related heart attack. Muscles in the heart had turned to fat. There were no drugs or traces of alcohol in the singer's system at the time of her death. If you or anyone you know needs help with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357.